King Arthur, Chapter 4. This is on page 434 of your textbook. Lucius Tiberius, Emperor of Rome, demands tribute from Britain. King Arthur declares war upon Rome. Arthur fights and kills a giant in northern Gaul. He and his knights then defeat the Roman army, and King Arthur becomes the ruler of the Roman Empire. King Arthur conquered Norway and Denmark. Then he conquered Gaul, which was a province of Rome. One day King Arthur was seated with his knights when 12 old men, their white hair encircled with gold bands, entered the hall 2 by 2. Each man grasped the hand of his companion with one hand, and held an olive branch in his other hand as he approached King Arthur's throne. They greeted the king and announced that they were ambassadors from Emperor Lucius Tiberius of Rome. King Arthur read aloud to the assembled group from the parchment scroll they handed him. From Lucius Tiberius, Emperor of Rome, to King Arthur, his enemy. Who are you that you can steal Roman land? Who are you to teach law to Rome, the father of justice? How dare you refuse to pay the tribute that you owe to Rome? Why do you refuse to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's? The document continued. Do you expect the lion to run from the calf, the wolf to fear the lamb, the leopard to quake before the hare? Such miracles do not occur in this world. Julius Caesar, our valiant ancestor, conquered Britain, and since that time Britons have paid tribute to Rome. King Arthur continued reading. If you do not appear before the Roman Senate and pay what you owe, then I will come with a mighty army and take Gaul from you. I will burn all of Britain and crush your knights. Should you attempt to flee, I will pursue you and give you no rest until I have destroyed you. Even if you were to dig a hole in the earth and hide yourself there, you could not escape the might of Rome. The Roman emperor's words were greeted with such an angry uproar that King Arthur physically had to restrain his knights from harming the Roman ambassadors. Then he met with his private council in the Giant's Tower. King Arthur said, "Friends and companions, your skill has enabled me to acquire treasure and gold and to subject many neighboring kingdoms to British rule. A nation is entitled to keep whatever land it can conquer and defend. However, Rome is a mighty nation. We must decide what action is in our own best interest." The council decided to go to war against Rome. King Arthur said to the ambassadors, "Tell your emperor that I intend to travel to Rome, but I will demand tribute, not pay it. I will bind and hang Lucius Tiberius. I will destroy your land and kill any knight who fights against me." The Roman ambassadors returned to their homeland and reported King Arthur's decision. Emperor Lucius decided to fight King Arthur in the mountains of Gaul. Arthur and his noblemen also prepared for war. On board the ship that was transporting him across the English Channel, King Arthur had a dream. He saw a dreadful bear flying through the air from the east. Its appearance was huge, hideous, and black as storm clouds. Lightning and thunder accompanied its flight, and the sea-coasts trembled from its horrible roars. A fearsome dragon flew toward the bear from the west. The glare from the dragon's eyes illuminated the sea and the countryside. The bear fought valiantly, but it could not withstand the dragon's repeated attacks. The dragon's fiery breath burned the bear until its scorched body fell lifeless to the earth below. When Arthur described his dream to his companions, they said, "The dragon symbolizes you. The bear represents a terrifying giant that you will have to fight. Just as the dragon overcomes the bear, so you will emerge victorious over the giant." Arthur replied, "I disagree with your interpretation. To me, my dream represents my coming conflict with Emperor Lucius Tiberius. In time, God will reveal its true meaning." Soon after the Britons arrived in northern Gaul, a knight came in search of King Arthur. "Lord King," he began, "for 7 years a monstrous giant has been tormenting us. The fiend destroys the farmers' houses, tears up their crops, and devours their cattle, horses, sheep, goats, and pigs. We have even seen him seize and eat men alive. He carries off women and children to his den on Mont Saint-Michel. So far he has eaten more than 500 people, including infants. On the cliff where he lurks you will find more dead than you can count, and more treasure than the Greeks found in Troy when they captured that ancient walled city." Now, the knight continued, The fiend has captured the noble niece of the Duke of Brittany. He has been holding her on the crest of Mont Saint-Michel for the past 2 weeks. By now she may even be dead. No one has been willing to risk death in order to save her. No one in this land, neither knight nor commoner, possesses the courage and strength to confront the giant. We no longer dare to attack him on land, for that means certain death. When we tried to attack him from the sea, he hurled huge boulders upon our ships and sank them, drowning those who were aboard. He roams wherever he wishes and does whatever he pleases. You must have noticed that our countryside lacks any sign of human life. To escape the giant's wrath, many people have hidden deep in the forests. Others are dying of starvation in their own secret hiding places. The fields have become a barren wasteland. We desperately need your help, the knight concluded. The monstrous giant will destroy this entire land and all of its people unless you come to our aid. Alas, King Arthur replied, had I known about this giant, I would have offered him my life before I let him ravage this land. I will seek this fiend upon his crag. If it is treasure or land that he wants, I will appease his anger. If his hatred is implacable, I will fight him to the death. I doubt that he surpasses me in skill and strength. That evening Arthur took his foster brother, Sir Kay, aside and said, At midnight tonight, without a word to anyone except our squires, I want you to come with me to find this giant. I intend to kill him myself. It is important for a king to set a fine example for his knights. I think my own strength and skill will be all that I need. However, if it looks as if I need help, come to my aid. At midnight the two were riding toward Mont Saint-Michel when they noticed a great fire blazing above the cliffs upon its crest. Reaching the inlet, they tethered their horses to a tree. They had to make the middle part of their journey in a small rowboat that was kept tied far up the beach, for whenever the tide was high, the hill rose straight out of the sea. As they climbed toward the crest of the high cliffs, they heard the sound of a woman's cry echoing through the trees above them. King Arthur withdrew Excalibur from its sheath and bravely continued on his way. I will walk ahead of you, but follow me, he said to Sir Kay. When we reach the crest of the hill, place yourself where you can observe what is happening. For your own safety, remain deep within the shadows. No matter what blows I may suffer, remain in hiding unless the giant pins me to the ground and has me at his mercy. It is not appropriate for anyone but me to fight the giant. Upon the crest of the hill, King Arthur found the huge blazing fire. Human bones lay scattered upon the ground, more or less picked clean of flesh. But there was no sign of the giant. Instead, the flames flickered upon the body of an old woman in torn clothing who was sitting by the side of a fresh grave mound. Her long hair fell over her face, and she was weeping and wailing with grief. As King Arthur entered the lighted area with Excalibur ready in his hand, the woman stopped her wailing and turned in his direction. "Who are you, and what evil fate has brought you here?" she asked. "Are you an angel or a knight? If heaven is your home, you may wander upon this mountain in safety. But if you are a knight and the earth is your home, then you are indeed an unfortunate man. I pity you, for you are about to be tortured to death by a giant, who will then tear your limbs to pieces. Even if you were made of the strongest metal, he would destroy you. Even if you had come with 50 knights as strong as you are, he would destroy you all. May his name be cursed." "I have just buried the Duke of Brittany's niece," the woman continued, "and the giant will not hesitate to kill you as well. He attacked the best of all castles in Brittany. The gates fell to pieces in his hands. He pulled down the wall of the great hall. He tore the door to my lady's room into 5 pieces. He grabbed us and carried us into this wild, wooded area. My poor child was only 15 years old. I was her nurse and had cared for her ever since the day of her birth. She died of terror in the monster's arms. I watched as the light of my life flickered and went out. Take my advice, fair lord, and flee while you can. To remain here is to seek your death. If the giant finds you, he will tear you to pieces and eat your flesh. Do not try to win him with words. He cannot be bought with lands, or with treaties, or even with chests of gold. He will rage where he chooses, regardless of the law, for he is his own master, and he answers to no one." Then the woman's face filled with terror. King Arthur turned to follow her gaze, and found himself staring at the monstrous giant. The horrible appearance of the fiend was matched only by the terrible nature of his deeds. His face was darkly splotched like the skin of a frog. His eyebrows hung low over his eyes, which burned with fire. His ears were enormous, and his nose was hooked like a hawk's beak. His mouth was as flat as a flounder's, and his fat, loose, fleshy lips spread apart to display his swollen gums. His bristly black beard fell over his chest, concealing part of his fat body. He had the broad neck and shoulders of a bull. His arms and legs stretched out like the limbs of a mighty oak tree. From the top of his head to the tip of his shovel-shaped feet, he was 30 feet tall. The giant wore a tunic made from human hair, fringed with the beards of men. He carried the corpses of 12 peasants tied together on his back. In his hand he carried a club so mighty that the 2 strongest farmers in the land could not have lifted it off the ground. The giant dropped the corpses by the fire, and approached Arthur with broad strides. As Arthur fingered Excalibur, he saw that the giant's mouth was still smeared with the clotted blood and scraps of flesh from his last meal. Even his beard and his hair were strewn with gore. Arthur said to him, "May great God in heaven, who rules the world, give you a short life and a shameful death. Surely you are the most foul fiend that was ever formed. Guard yourself, you dog, and prepare to die, for this day my hands will kill you." The giant responded by raising his fearsome club. He grinned like a ferocious boar, confident of its menacing tusks. Then he growled, and foam spilled from his gaping mouth. King Arthur raised his shield and prayed to God that it would protect him against the fiend's mighty club. The giant's first blow fell upon Arthur's shield, making the cliffs clang like an anvil and shattering his source of protection. The shock of the impact almost knocked Arthur to the ground, but he quickly recovered. The blow ignited King Arthur's rage, and he furiously struck the giant on the forehead with his sword. Blood gushed into the giant's eyes and down his cheeks, blinding him. Just as an enraged boar, its flesh torn from the attacks of hunting hounds, turns and charges upon a hunter, so the giant, maddened with the pain of his wound, rushed with a roar upon King Arthur. Groping blindly with his hands, the giant grabbed the king by the shoulders and clasped him to his chest, trying to crush Arthur's ribs and burst his heart. King Arthur summoned all of his strength and twisted his body out from under the giant's grasp. "Peace to you, my lord," the giant exclaimed. "Who are you that fights so skillfully with me? Only Arthur, the most noble of all kings, could defeat me in combat." "I am the Arthur of whom you speak," the king replied. Then, quick as lightning, Arthur struck the giant repeatedly with his sword. Unable to see through the blood in his eyes, the giant never knew where the next blow would fall. Arthur's sword thrusts rained upon him relentlessly until one finally entered his ear and plunged into his skull. The giant gave a dreadful roar and crashed to the ground like a mighty oak tree torn up by a furious storm wind. Arthur gazed upon his fallen prey and laughed with relief. Sir Kay stepped into the firelight and said, "That was an impressive death blow. That fiend should have worn a helmet." "Take your sword, Kay, and slice off his head," Arthur commanded. "I want to take it back to our companions for everyone to admire. If we place our swords through his ears, we can carry the head between us all the way back to our tents. If you want any treasure, take what pleases you. I want nothing more than the fiend's tunic and his club." The first glow of dawn was streaking the sky with shades of rose when King Arthur and Sir Kay entered their camp. Word had already traveled from tent to tent, so an enthusiastic group of knights greeted their return. They stared at the giant's huge, hideous head in awe, for its size and ugliness were beyond compare. The Duke of Brittany built a chapel over his niece's grave on top of Mont Saint-Michel, so that she would not be forgotten. By the time it was finished, the allies of King Arthur had arrived from Ireland and Scotland, and they all set forth to meet the Roman legions. The two knights without equal in King Arthur's court were Sir Launcelot of the Lake and Sir Gawain, the king's nephew. Both showed their prowess in the war against Rome. In the first battle, Sir Gawain received serious wounds but fought on. When the battle ended, Arthur's knights had killed more than 10,000 Roman soldiers and had taken many prisoners and sent the rest fleeing. King Arthur put Sir Launcelot in command of the prisoners, who were to be taken to Paris. Emperor Lucius Tiberius sent 60,000 Roman soldiers to ambush Launcelot. Launcelot's scouts warned him of the ambush. Even though the Romans outnumbered the Britons 6-1, he met them in deadly combat. He was so strong and so skillful that his soldiers won the battle, killing many Roman soldiers and forcing the rest to run from them as sheep run from a lion or a wolf. But when he returned to the king, Arthur said, "Your courage nearly destroyed you, Launcelot. It is foolish to fight under circumstances where you are badly outnumbered." Sir Launcelot replied, "No, it is not foolish, for once a person acts shamefully, he can never recover his honor." The decisive battle followed. King Arthur met Emperor Lucius Tiberius in a long, mighty contest. Arthur received a serious wound, but ultimately he took Excalibur and sliced off the Roman emperor's head. That day, King Arthur and his men also killed 60 Roman senators and 20 kings of countries that were Roman allies. "Bring these corpses before your senate with this message," King Arthur commanded the 3 senators who remained alive. "Tell them this is the tribute they have demanded of me. Tell them also that if this is not sufficient, I will pay an additional tribute when I arrive in Rome. Make it clear to them that this is the only kind of tribute I will pay. Finally, tell them that they may never again demand a tribute or a tax of any kind from Britain." Shortly after the funeral procession started, Arthur and his knights began their own march toward Rome. City after city in the provinces yielded to them. The cities of Italy, including Rome, also yielded. When the leading Roman officials asked for peace, Arthur agreed to hold his round table in Rome that Christmas and to be crowned Emperor of Rome at the time. Thus it came to pass that King Arthur ruled all the lands of the Roman Empire. After he was crowned, Arthur rewarded his knights and servants generously with land. Each knight now longed to return home to his wife. King Arthur himself had no desire to acquire more power. "We have achieved great glory and honor," he announced. "It is not wise to attempt to tempt God." So Arthur and his army returned to Britain and received a royal welcome throughout the kingdom.